"You're broke, Mom. You're nothing but a burden." That was the last thing my son screamed before slamming the door in my face. Rain poured down like judgment as I stood on his porch, the porch I helped him pay for, clutching an old brown suitcase. The light from the living room spilled through the window for a second. I saw my daughter-in-law smirk, then pull the curtains shut. For a moment, I couldn't move. That house had my fingerprints on every wall, from the kitchen tiles I picked to the roses I planted under the window when Ethan was just 10. Now it wasn't home anymore. It was a stranger's castle. I whispered to the rain, "You'll miss me when I'm gone," and dragged my suitcase down the driveway. The taxi driver on Route 17 didn't ask questions. He looked at me in the mirror, once saw the tears I tried to hide, and just nodded. I told him, "Anywhere but here." At the motel, the wallpaper peeled like old memories. I sat on the bed, soaked and shaking, scrolling through my phone. No message, no apology, just silence. So I opened my banking app, not out of habit, but out of anger. I stared at the number for a long, quiet moment. $4,870,027. I smiled through the tears. Broke, huh? Back at his house, Ethan woke up the next morning still furious. He opened his phone, maybe to block my number, maybe to prove I had nothing. But when my name and that number flashed on his screen, he froze. And just like that, everything changed. Tell me, if your child called you worthless, would you ever forgive them after this? I wasn't always the woman crying outside a motel room. Once I was the woman everyone at First National Bank called steady as sunrise. 42 years I worked there, never late, never called in sick. My name was Marilyn Cooper, widow of Richard Cooper, mother of one. I built a life brick by brick, saving every dime like it was sacred. After Richard died of a stroke, I poured everything into raising Ethan. He was 12, skinny, stubborn, and scared of the dark. I told him, "You'll never go without, not while I'm breathing." And I meant it. When he wanted to play baseball, I bought the glove. When he went to college, I sold Richard's truck. When he and Tracy married, I gave them the down payment for their house. "You'll always have a place here, Mom," Ethan had said, holding my hand. I remember the warmth of it, the tremor in his voice. If I had known that promise would turn to poison, I might have let go sooner. After I retired, I moved into their guest room. I didn't need much: a small bed, a TV that only played Jeopardy reruns, and my knitting basket. I helped with groceries, cooked dinner, paid the utility bills when they ran behind. I thought that was love's small daily sacrifices that no one noticed but made life smoother. Then the tone of the house changed. Tracy's perfume lingered longer than her good mornings. She began calling me Marilyn instead of Mom, the kind of politeness that cuts sharper than cruelty. One night while I was folding laundry, I overheard them in the kitchen. "Tracy, she's been here for 5 years, Ethan. 5. Don't you think that's enough, Ethan? She doesn't have anywhere else to go, Tracy. She has her pension, her savings. We're trying to start our own family, and she's always here." I froze with one of his old t-shirts in my hands. It still smelled faintly of detergent and betrayal. Later, Ethan came to my room, pretending it was his idea to talk. "Mom, Tracy's just overwhelmed," he said, scratching his neck the way he did when he lied. "I can find a place," I whispered. He looked relieved, and that hurt worse than words. But I stayed. I kept hoping he'd change, that love would win over selfishness. I helped Tracy with the baby shower, even bought them a new crib. She posted a picture of it on Facebook with the caption, "Blessed beyond words, no mention of me." Then Ethan lost his job. The tension thickened like fog. Bills piled up. My pension check became ours, and I gave quietly, foolishly, until my own checking account hit 0. Still, I smiled, saying, "It's just a rough patch." The rough patch became a storm. One evening, I overheard them arguing in the living room. "Ethan, she won't leave Tracy. Then make her tell her she's broke. Maybe she'll finally go." That's when I knew. It wasn't about space. It was about pride. I had become a mirror they didn't like looking into, a reminder of their failures, of everything they owed. So when Ethan yelled, "You're broke, Mom," I didn't even answer. I just looked at him. He had his father's jawline, but none of his heart. That night as I packed, I took small things, my wedding photo, Richard's watch, the ceramic angel my mother gave me when I was 15. The rest I left behind. Even the embroidered blanket I made for Ethan when he was born. Outside, thunder rolled as if heaven itself was angry for me. The taxi driver asked where to. I said, "Anywhere quiet." He dropped me at a small roadside motel beside an old diner. I could smell bacon grease and loneliness in the air. The neon sign blinked vacancy in red letters. Inside the room, I peeled off my wet clothes and wrapped myself in a towel. The mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, gray hair, messy eyes, swollen shoulders, shaking. But beneath the exhaustion, I saw something else, a flicker of steel. I whispered to the reflection, "You've survived worse, Marilyn." I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through old pictures Ethan at graduation, Ethan holding his newborn, Ethan hugging me at Christmas. Every photo had the same smile. I wondered when that smile stopped meaning love and started meaning convenience. I checked my phone again, still no message, not even a goodbye. So I wrote one to myself, "You are not broke, you are not a burden, you are a woman who built her world and watched it get stolen. Now it's time to take it back." I didn't know how yet, but something in me shifted, that night quiet certain, like the turning of a key, and somewhere miles away my son slept peacefully, not realizing the storm he'd just unleashed. Because when a mother loses everything, she remembers what she's truly capable of. I didn't sleep that night. The motel walls were thin, and I could hear a couple arguing next door, their voices rising, falling, breaking like the sound of my own thoughts. I stared at the ceiling fan, spinning slow circles, thinking about every word my son had thrown at me. "You're broke." That word echoed louder than thunder. But broke wasn't about money. It was about being unwanted, about realizing the people you raised now saw you as clutter. At dawn, I made coffee using the old drip machine on the counter. It tasted like burnt plastic, but it was warm and I needed something that felt like routine. I opened the curtains and watched the road trucks passing strangers living lives that didn't hurt like mine. When the sun finally rose, I dialed Ethan's number. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. "It's Mom, just calling to let you know I'm safe." My voice cracked. "Take care of yourself." Then I hung up before the silence swallowed me. I packed my things, took the last $50 bill in my wallet, and walked to the diner next door. The waitress, a red-haired woman with laugh lines, handed me a menu. "Rough morning, hon?" she asked. "You could say that," I murmured. She poured me coffee without waiting for an answer. "Happens to the best of us. Eat something hot, it helps." Her kindness almost broke me. As I stirred my coffee, I thought about my old life, the steady rhythm of the bank, the click of heels on tile, the smell of paper and ink. I'd spent decades managing other people's money, watching fortunes rise and fall. Yet here I was, the banker with nowhere to sleep. After breakfast, I took a walk down the street. The town was small gas station, pawn shop, a hardware store with faded signs. Across the street stood a church with a cracked bell tower. I went inside not to pray, but to breathe. The place smelled of old wood and wax. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass painting my hands in color. I sat in the last pew and whispered, "Lord, if this is a lesson, I'm listening. But please, don't make me invisible." When I walked back out, the air felt lighter, or maybe I just stood a little taller. That afternoon, I found a small ad pinned on a corkboard outside the diner room for rent. Quiet neighborhood, $200 week, no pets. I called the number. A woman named Martha Jenkins answered. She sounded cautious at first, but softened when she heard my voice. "Come by this evening," she said. "It's just me and my cat, and I could use some company." When I arrived, Martha greeted me in an oversized cardigan, holding a mug that said, "Coffee first, judgment later." Her home was cluttered but warm crocheted blankets, family photos, the faint scent of apple pie. She led me to a small room at the back. "It's not much," she said, "but the bed's soft and the rent's flexible." I smiled. "It's perfect." That night as I unpacked, Martha knocked on my door holding a slice of pie. "Landlord's welcome gift," she joked. I laughed for the first time in days. We talked for hours about her late husband, about the town, about how quiet life gets when people stop calling. She listened, really listened. When I told her why I was there, she didn't gasp or pity me. She just said, "Sometimes the people we raise forget who taught them to stand." Her words sank deep. Over the next few days, I tried to build a new rhythm. Mornings at the diner, afternoons walking through the park, evenings helping Martha with crossword puzzles. It wasn't home, but it was peace. Still at night, I'd open my phone and stare at Ethan's number. I thought about calling, about forgiving, about pretending everything was fine. But then I'd remember that door slamming, and my heart hardened again. One evening, while helping Martha clean out her attic, I found a dusty old box with the logo of First National Bank, my old workplace. "You can toss that," Martha said. "Bought the house from a retired teller. Must have been hers." Curiosity made me open it. Inside were old deposit ledgers, sealed envelopes, and tucked beneath them a folder with my name on it. My breath caught. "How did this get here?" I whispered. Martha looked over my shoulder. "That your name? Yes, it's mine." Inside the folder were documents I hadn't seen in decades, pension statements, employee stock records, and a letter signed by the bank's founder, William Grayson. "Upon your retirement, your deferred investment will remain under your name until claimed. Thank you for 40 years of integrity and service." I blinked, reading it twice. Deferred investment. I thought my retirement payout was small because I left early after Richard's death. But this hinted at something bigger. Martha smiled when she saw my face. "Looks like the universe is paying attention after all." That night, I sat on my bed with those papers spread out like a map of my life, every number, every date, every missing piece of my worth. For the first time in weeks, I felt something warm bloom inside me. Not anger, not revenge, power. The next morning, I dressed in my old work blazer, the one that still smelled faintly of coffee and ink, and told Martha I'm going back to the bank. She grinned. "Good. Make them remember who you are." As I stepped outside, sunlight spilled across the road, bright and sharp. I realized something simple yet profound. Ethan had taken my home, but he hadn't taken me. And if there was still a single spark left of the woman who built everything from nothing, then this story was far from over. When I walked back into First National Bank that morning, every step felt like stepping into an old photograph, polished floors, faint hum of printers, the smell of toner and coffee. I'd spent 40 years of my life here, yet no one recognized me now. The new tellers were young, their smiles mechanical, their voices rehearsed. A manager in a navy suit approached, eyebrows raised. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, standing taller than I felt. "I used to work here. My name's Marilyn Cooper. I need to speak with someone about an old employee investment account, one that was never closed." He blinked, unsure whether to take me seriously. "Do you have documentation?" I slid the dusty folder across the counter like a weapon. Inside were letters, signatures, and pension ledgers stamped with the bank's crest. He skimmed through them, then glanced up, his posture shifting. "One moment, please." Minutes later, I was led to a small office with frosted glass and leather chairs. The plaque on the desk read, "Elaine Grayson, Senior Finance Officer." My heart skipped. Grayson, the same last name as the man who'd signed my letter decades ago. Elaine smiled warmly. "Mrs. Cooper, I'm William Grayson's granddaughter. I've heard your name before you were one of his most trusted employees." For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. "He was a good man," I said quietly. She nodded. "He was. Now let's see what you've got." Elaine scanned the files carefully, her brow furrowed, then lifted in surprise. "Well, Mrs. Cooper, this is unusual. It appears your deferred investment plan was never liquidated. With interest and market growth, she turned the monitor toward me. It's now worth just over $4.8 million. I froze. "That can't be right." "It is," she said gently, "and it's all in your name." Untouched. The air left my lungs. For years I'd lived quietly, believing my life savings were gone, yet they'd been waiting here, compounding, growing in the dark. Elaine printed the documents and handed them to me. "You can transfer this into a modern account today. I'd suggest we create a digital profile so you can track everything online." As she spoke, her words blurred into a soft hum. My hands trembled around the pen as I signed the forms. I wasn't just reclaiming money, I was reclaiming my power, the part of me I'd buried under guilt and motherhood. When the process was done, Elaine said softly, "If you don't mind me saying, it's rare to see someone with this much untouched patience. Most people cash out early." I smiled faintly. Patience has been my only currency for a long time. Walking out of the bank, the sunlight felt different, warmer, cleaner. For the first time since that night on Ethan's porch, I didn't feel small. I felt steady. I stopped by a coffee shop across the street, sat by the window, and opened my new banking app. The numbers glowed on the screen. $4 $70,000.27. I let out a slow breath. "You were wrong, Ethan," I whispered. "You had no idea who your mother really was." My mind began to race, not with revenge, but with clarity. I didn't need to prove anything to him, not yet, but I wanted him to see the truth one day in a way he'd never forget. As I stirred my coffee, the barista, a young woman with freckles, smiled at me. "Rough morning?" she asked. I chuckled. "Actually, it's been a long time coming." That night back at Martha's house, I told her everything. The documents, the money, the years of silence that had suddenly paid off. She laughed, wiping her eyes. "So you're not broke. You're practically a millionaire." "I guess I am," I said softly. "But I'm still a mother first, and a mother doesn't want revenge, she wants understanding." Martha tilted her head. "Maybe understanding starts when the truth hurts enough." Her words lingered long after she left the room. Later, as I lay in bed, the glow from my phone screen reflected on the ceiling. My son's contact stared back at me, Ethan Cooper. I hovered my finger over the call button, then stopped. No, not yet. I had something better in mind, because tomorrow morning my son would see something that would change everything, something that would make him realize the cost of what he'd thrown away. And this time, I wouldn't have to say a word. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with numbers, memories, and the bitter taste of justice long delayed. The glow of my phone screen kept lighting up the dark room, that account balance, those 6 digits at the front. It wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that I hadn't lived my whole life just to be tossed aside like an empty envelope. By sunrise, a quiet plan had begun to form. At 7 a.m., I slipped into my blazer, again pressed simple but dignified. Martha looked up from her toast as I passed through the kitchen. "Heading somewhere millionaire," she teased with a grin. "Not to spend it," I said. "To make a point," she nodded. "Just don't let anger talk louder than wisdom." Outside, the morning air was sharp, almost electric. I walked down the street past the diner and bought a fresh bouquet of white lilies, Richard's favorite. Then instead of going straight to the cemetery, I stopped by the bank's branch downtown, the one closest to Ethan's house. The young teller smiled. "How can I help you today, ma'am? I'd like to make a transfer," I said, sliding my ID and documents across the counter. "And I'd like a confirmation receipt emailed to this address." It was Ethan's email. She hesitated. "Are you sure? Completely." When the transaction was done, I stood outside the bank and took a deep breath. I just moved a small portion, $20,000 into a trust fund, labeled Cooper Family Education Account. A name he would recognize instantly. I wasn't trying to flaunt my wealth. I was reminding my son who built the ground beneath his feet. From there, I took a cab to the cemetery. The morning fog hung low, curling around the old oak trees. I knelt beside Richard's headstone, brushing away the leaves. "Can you believe it? Rich," I whispered. He called me broke. You'd laugh if you saw his face tomorrow. The silence of the place wrapped around me, not empty, but comforting. For the first time in years, I felt him near me again, as if the air itself was saying, "You did what you had to, Marilyn." After visiting the grave, I stopped at the grocery store and bought ingredients for dinner: roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans. Old habits die hard. I cooked it at Martha's house, the smell filling the kitchen like home. When Martha came in, she blinked. "Smells like Sunday dinner. It's the first good day I've had in a long time." I smiled. Over dinner, I told her about my plan. She listened without interrupting, just nodding slowly. "So you're not going to confront him directly?" "No," I said, slicing into the chicken. Sometimes silence screams louder than shouting. That night after Martha went to bed, I sat in her living room with the glow of my laptop. I logged into my online banking profile and stared at that shining number again. $4,870, $27. It wasn't about spending or revenge. It was about reclaiming my story, about no longer being the woman who needed permission to exist. Then an idea came to me. I opened my email and drafted a message with no words, just an image attachment, a screenshot of my account balance. The subject line read, "From your broke mother." I hovered over the send button for a long, silent minute. My heart raced, palms damp, 1,000 memories pressing against my ribs. Then I clicked send. I shut the laptop, leaned back, and exhaled. Whatever happened next, it was out of my hands. The next morning, my phone buzzed, non-stop texts, missed calls, even voicemails. Ethan's name flashed across the screen again and again. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat by the window sipping coffee, watching the sun climb over the horizon. Martha shuffled in, sleepy-eyed, and asked, "Well, did he see it?" I smiled faintly. "He saw it. And he's finally speechless." She laughed softly. "Good. Let him think a while before you pick up." I nodded, my heart strangely calm. Because now, for the first time in years, the power wasn't his, it was mine. And tomorrow, when I did decide to answer, I already knew exactly what I would say. When I finally decided to answer Ethan's call, it was late afternoon. The sunlight filtered through Martha's lace curtains, cutting thin gold lines across the floor. My phone buzzed again and again until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I took a deep breath, pressed accept, and let his voice pour through the speaker. "Mom. Mom." I didn't mean what I said. His voice was shaky, like a child caught doing something awful. Tracy was upset. I was stressed. I cut him off quietly. "You told me I was broke, Ethan." There was a pause. I could almost hear him swallow. I didn't know. Didn't know what I asked, though I already knew what he was about to say. That you had money. Real money. I closed my eyes. The words hit me like cold air. "Not that you were hurting. Not that I threw you out. Just that you had money. So that was the price tag of a mother's worth." "I see," I said, keeping my voice calm. "So you care now that I'm not the burden you imagined." "No, that's not what I meant. He stumbled over the words. "I thought you were living off your pension, struggling. I didn't know about the investments, the account." "The account? He couldn't even say your life savings." "Did you ever ask?" I whispered. Silence stretched, then softer. "Can I come see you?" "Please, Mom. I need to explain." I hesitated. Every instinct screamed don't. But another voice, older, quieter, reminded me I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for truth. "Tomorrow morning," I said finally, "at the diner on Route 17, 9 o'clock. When I hung up, Martha poked her head in. "Was that him?" "Yes," she smirked. "Guess the prince found out his kingdom's built on your savings." I smiled sadly. "Let's see what kind of man he is when the curtain drops." The next morning, the diner smelled of bacon grease and cheap coffee, the same as the night I first arrived, soaked and heartbroken. But this time, I sat tall, wearing a cream cardigan and the gold locket Richard gave me on our 10th anniversary. At 9:07, Ethan walked in. His once confident stride was gone. He looked smaller, thinner. The same boy I raised hidden beneath layers of pride and regret. "Hi, Mom." I nodded toward the seat across from me. "Sit down." He did, eyes darting around nervously. The waitress poured him coffee. He thanked her but didn't touch it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Only the sound of plates clinking and the low hum of country music filled the silence. Finally, he said, "I saw your email. I thought it was a joke." "I'm not much of a comedian," I said evenly. He winced. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? You had all that money. You could have lived comfortably. You didn't have to stay with us." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, so you kicked me out of kindness now." His eyes dropped. "I didn't mean for things to get that bad." Tracy, I interrupted. "Is she why you're here?" He looked up sharply, guilt flashing across his face. She's sorry too. We just didn't know you." "There it is again," I said softly. "You didn't know I had money. That's the part that keeps coming back, isn't it?" He tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "Ethan, do you know what broke really means?" I asked. It's not about dollars. It's when you take something priceless, love, trust, family, and treat it like spare change. His eyes filled, but I didn't let up. I had to say this not for revenge, but for every sleepless night and swallowed word. I gave you everything I had, every check I earned, every ounce of energy in my body, every second of peace after your father died, all for you. And you didn't just throw me out of your house. You threw me out of your heart. Tears slipped down his cheek. I'm sorry, Mom. I swear I didn't mean... Sorry doesn't fix the bruise you can't see, I said. But maybe it's a start. He reached across the table, but I didn't move my hands. I wasn't ready. After a long pause, he said quietly, So, what are you going to do now? With, you know the money? I smiled faintly. Live. He blinked. That's it. That's everything I said. He looked genuinely lost. You're not going to buy a new house or something, I already have one, I said, nodding toward the window where the sunlight hit the old motel sign across the road. Peace doesn't need a mortgage. He sat back sighing. Mom, I was stupid. I was angry. I thought you were just staying with us because you couldn't manage alone. And what if that had been true? I asked. Would that have made me disposable? He flinched. No. Yes, Ethan, I said, voice firm now. That's exactly what it meant to you then. You saw weakness and you called it waste. You saw love and you called it inconvenience. But you know what's funny? I leaned forward. Now that you know I'm wealthy, suddenly you remember I'm your mother. His face crumpled. That's not fair. Neither is life, I whispered. We sat in silence again. The waitress refilled my coffee, but I barely noticed. Then Ethan said something that caught me off guard. Mom, we're struggling. Tracy's business is failing, and we've got a mortgage payment due next week. I'm not asking for money, I just don't know what to do. There it was, the truth raw and unvarnished. For the first time in years, my son wasn't pretending to be stronger than he was. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small folded envelope. I'd written it the night before. I slid it across the table. What's this? Open it. He unfolded it slowly. Inside was a check not for millions, but for $5,000, and a handwritten note that said, for your child's future, not your comfort. His eyes widened. Mom, that's not charity, I said. That's a lesson. You'll either invest it wisely or waste it, like you did my trust. Your choice. He looked at the check, then back at me. His lips trembled. Thank you. I stood up. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you've learned to value what doesn't come with a price tag. He stood too, as if afraid to let me walk away again. Mom, please, come home. Tracy and I can. I smiled sadly. Ethan, I am home. Wherever I find peace, that's home now. He looked at me like he finally understood, maybe for the first time in his life. I reached up, touched his cheek, and said softly, I still love you. But love doesn't mean staying where I'm unloved. Then I turned and walked out the bell above the diner door, jingling behind me. Outside, the sky had cleared. The same road that once carried me away in tears now shimmered under the sunlight. I breathed in deeply, the air crisp and forgiving. And for the first time since that stormy night, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a woman reborn. But as I crossed the parking lot, I didn't see the black car that had just pulled in or the familiar face inside watching me closely. Because while I thought one storm had ended, another was about to begin. The bell above the diner door chimed softly behind me as I stepped into the parking lot. The morning sun had turned golden warm on my skin, but something about the air felt heavy, like calm before thunder. I didn't notice the black car right away, not until I heard a door slam and someone call my name. Mrs. Cooper. I turned startled. A tall man in a charcoal suit stood beside the car holding a briefcase. He wasn't Ethan. His expression was calm but serious, the kind of calm you only see in people who deal with money or secrets. Yes, I said carefully. He approached, extending a business card. Michael Dunn, Executive Legal Affairs, First National Bank. My stomach tightened. Is something wrong? Not wrong, he said, glancing toward the diner window where Ethan still sat watching. But something you should know. I looked at him warily. Go on. He opened the briefcase right there in the parking lot, producing a thick envelope with my name typed neatly across it. This was recently discovered in the Grayson family archives. It concerns your husband, Richard Cooper. My chest went cold. My husband's been gone for 26 years, I understand, Dunn said gently, but it seems he left something behind, something only you can access. He handed me a smaller, sealed document labeled Confidential Addendum, 1996, Pension Transfer. Mr. Dunn, I said, voice trembling, what exactly am I looking at? He lowered his voice. Mrs. Cooper, your husband didn't just leave you his life insurance. According to this record, he transferred an additional offshore account in your name connected to his former investment firm. That account hasn't been touched in nearly 3 decades. My breath hitched. An offshore account, yes, ma'am. And based on preliminary statements, it may contain substantial assets. We're talking 7 figures, possibly more. I stood frozen, the paper heavy in my hand, Richard. My Richard, the man who used to hide cash in old shoeboxes, who never even owned a credit card. Dunn continued, we'll need to confirm ownership through verification of your late husband's original beneficiary documents. But as of now, everything points to you. I looked toward the diner window. Ethan had stepped outside, eyes narrowing as he saw the man talking to me. He started walking toward us. Is this about money? He snapped when he reached us. Who is this guy? I exhaled slowly. Ethan, this is Mr. Dunn. He works with the bank. Dunn offered a polite nod. Your mother is the legal beneficiary of a dormant account your late father established. We're simply verifying its current status. Ethan blinked, clearly confused, and then that familiar spark of greed flickered in his eyes. A dormant account, he repeated. How much are we talking about, Ethan? I warned. This doesn't concern you, doesn't concern me, Mom. If Dad left money, it's part of our family estate. No, I said sharply. It's mine. Everything your father left was handled years ago. Whatever this is, it's between me and him. He clenched his fists. You're unbelievable. You sit here pretending to be this humble victim, and all this time you've been sitting on millions. I looked straight at him. You kicked me out, Ethan. Remember that before you speak. The parking lot went quiet. Even Dunn looked uncomfortable. Finally, Ethan muttered, This isn't fair. You're enough, I snapped. My voice cracked like a whip, silencing him. For once in your life, stop talking about fairness and start talking about gratitude. He stepped back, eyes wide. I'd never raised my voice like that before, not even when he was a boy throwing tantrums over broken toys. Dunn cleared his throat gently. Mrs. Cooper, I can leave you my contact information. We'll arrange a private meeting this week to go over the documents. Thank you, I said, still staring at Ethan. When the man left, Ethan's tone softened instantly. Mom, please, I didn't mean to. But I was already walking away. You said what you meant the first time I said over my shoulder. Back at Martha's house, I laid the documents on the kitchen table. She whistled low when I explained. So your late husband might have left you another fortune. I shook my head slowly. It's not about the money anymore. It's about the truth. I spent my whole life thinking Richard left me barely enough to survive. But he must have known something planned something. Maybe he didn't trust the bank system after all. Martha sipped her tea, eyes glinting. Seems like the men in your life have a habit of underestimating you. I smiled wryly. They sure do. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. Why hadn't I known? Why had Richard kept this a secret? I spent the next few days digging through old boxes, finding fragments of the past, a faded photo of us at the lake house, letters in his handwriting, even one marked, "If something happens to me." My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. Marilyn, if you're reading this, then life didn't give me enough time to explain. There are things I invested in long-term secure, away from greedy hands. I wanted to make sure you'd always be safe, even if people around you forgot your worth. If anyone ever calls you poor, remember you hold more than money. You hold legacy. My eyes blurred with tears. I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered, "Oh, Richard, you always knew." Martha sniffled beside me. "He sounds like he loved you deeply." "He did," I said softly. "And I think he still does through every line he left behind. The next day, the bank arranged a meeting with Dunn at the regional headquarters. The moment I walked in, the smell of mahogany and paper brought memories flooding back. But this time, I wasn't an employee. I was the woman they all underestimated. Dunn led me to a conference room where screens displayed account histories and transfer records. "We confirmed your late husband's investment," he said. "It matured substantially. After currency adjustments and interest growth, the total value stands at approximately 8.6 million USD. I nearly laughed, a small, incredulous sound that turned into tears. "Richard, what have you done?" Dunn smiled. "Something remarkable, it seems." He slid a document toward me. "Sign here to transfer ownership to your current account." My hand shook as I signed. 8.6 million. I was 68 years old, retired, widowed, unwanted by my own son, and suddenly one of the wealthiest women in the county. But what I felt wasn't triumph. It was peace, the kind that comes when life finally admits you were right all along. That evening, I sat by the window of my small, rented room, the city lights reflecting off the glass. I stared at the bank receipt in my hands, still not believing it. My phone buzzed again, Ethan calling for the 10th time that day. I didn't answer. Instead, I texted one simple message. "Your father always said, wealth doesn't change people. It reveals them." Then I turned off my phone. Martha came in quietly, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "So, what now, rich lady?" I smiled. "Now I rest. And I think about what comes next. Going to tell your son about the second account I looked out the window watching the headlights pass. No, not yet. He needs to learn what silence feels like, the same silence he gave me when I stood outside that house." Martha nodded. "You're stronger than most, Marilyn." I shook my head. "No, just older and finally done apologizing for surviving." As the night deepened, I set the papers aside and closed my eyes. For the first time in decades, I didn't dream of loss. I dreamed of Richard's hand in mine, of the two of us walking into sunlight. And somewhere far away, Ethan sat in his darkened living room, staring at his phone, wondering what kind of mother chooses silence over forgiveness. He didn't know yet that silence was forgiveness, the kind that forces you to face your own reflection. And as I drifted into sleep, I realized something I'd never dared to think before. Maybe losing everything wasn't punishment. Maybe it was preparation. 2 days passed in a strange calm, the kind of quiet that feels both earned and fragile, like glass between your fingers. I spent my mornings tending Martha's small garden, pruning roses that hadn't bloomed in years. The rhythm soothed me. The world finally made sense again. Dirt sunroots, all honest things. No pretense, no betrayal. Until one afternoon, a black envelope arrived. No sender name, no return address. Just my name written in thick pen, Mrs. Marilyn Cooper. Martha found it first. "It was dropped off by courier," she said, frowning. "Didn't say who sent it." I wiped my hands and opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper, a bank statement, and a note clipped to it. The note read, "If you think secrets die with time, you're wrong. Your husband didn't leave you everything. He left something unfinished. Check account number 93621. It's not what you think." I stared at it, my heart thudding. The paper looked old, but the ink was new, fresh. "Is this a joke?" Martha asked. "I don't think so," I whispered. The statement attached bore the same offshore bank name Dunn had mentioned, Barclay Financial Holdings, Zurich. But there was something odd. The transaction history didn't end in 1996. It showed activity, small, consistent withdrawals continuing through 2015. I frowned. That can't be right. Richard died in 99. Martha's eyes widened. "Then who's been touching it?" I didn't sleep that night. My mind churned with questions I didn't want answers to. By morning, I called Dunn. He met me that afternoon, papers spread across the same polished table as before. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, adjusting his glasses, "this information, it shouldn't exist. That account was listed as dormant for over 2 decades, yet someone's been withdrawing from it," I said, sliding him the copy. He studied it, brow furrowing. "These withdrawals were small enough to avoid alerts. Clever. Whoever did this knew the system. Can you find out who?" He nodded slowly. "I'll need authorization to request access logs. You'll have to sign a verification form." "Do it." I said without hesitation. He gave me a wary look. Are you sure you want to know? Sometimes the truth. I've lived through lies, Mr. Dunn, I said. The truth is the only thing that doesn't rot. 3 days later, he called me back. His tone was different this time, hesitant, even shaken. Mrs. Cooper, I have the report. You might want to sit down. I'm listening. The withdrawals came from a proxy account, he said. Each transaction was authorized under secondary beneficiary rights added to your husband's original file before his death. My pulse quickened. Secondary beneficiary, Richard never mentioned anyone else. There's a name on record, he continued quietly. Ethan Cooper. I froze. For a moment I couldn't breathe. That's impossible, I whispered. Ethan was 12 when Richard died. Dunn hesitated. According to these documents, the beneficiary was activated when your son turned 18. He's been receiving small quarterly payments ever since roughly $20,000 a year. I sank back in the chair, the room spinning. He knew I can't say for certain. The transfers might have been automated, but the signature on the activation form is his. My throat burned. I remembered all those years. He claimed to struggle the bills, the debts, the constant pleas for help, all while he was quietly collecting his father's money behind my back. How much in total? I asked hoarsely. Dunn glanced at the screen. Just under $400,000. I felt something break inside me, not anger, not even shock. Just a deep, hollow ache. He'd been taking from his father's account for years, and still he'd looked me in the eye and called me broke. When I left the bank, the air outside felt colder than it should have. That evening, I sat by the fireplace at Martha's, the documents spread out before me. She read the numbers, her lips tightening. So all this time, your son had money his father left him, and he let you think you were the poor one. Yes, I whispered. What are you going to do? I stared at the flickering flames. Nothing. Not yet, Marilyn. No, I said firmly. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about letting him reveal himself. Martha frowned. How I looked up a plan forming in my mind. I'll invite him over. Tell him there's something more his father left. If he comes for love, I'll know. But if he comes for money, I didn't finish the sentence. The next morning, I called Ethan. Mom, he said, voice hopeful. I was going to call you. I wanted to apologize again. Then you'll get the chance, I said evenly. Come by Martha's tomorrow. There's something I need to show you, something your father left behind. There was a pause too long. Then he said, I'll be there. When I hung up, Martha gave me a wary look. You're walking into a storm again. Maybe I said, folding the papers carefully, but this time I'm the one holding the umbrella. That night, as rain began to patter against the windows, I stood by the mirror and looked at myself. Really looked. The woman in the reflection wasn't broken or old. She was sharper now, carved by betrayal into something diamond hard. Tomorrow, I would look my son in the eye. And for once, he would be the one without answers. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of color that always meant a storm was coming. I stood by the window watching the rain begin to thread down the glass and wondered if I was really ready to face him. Martha brewed coffee in the kitchen, humming a hymn under her breath. She glanced at me over her shoulder. You sure about this, Marilyn? I nodded slowly. It's time. I've spent too long waiting for apologies that never come. Today, I get my truth. At exactly 10 o'clock, a silver SUV pulled up outside. Ethan stepped out wearing a pressed shirt and the kind of forced smile that never reached the eyes. He carried an umbrella, though he didn't bother to open it. The rain soaked his hair within seconds. He knocked twice before I opened the door. Mom, come in, I said simply. He hesitated, maybe expecting warmth, but found only quiet. Martha excused herself politely and disappeared into her room, leaving us alone in the small living room. Ethan glanced around awkwardly. Nice place. Cozy. It's temporary, I said, like some things in life. He cleared his throat. You said you wanted to show me something about Dad. I gestured to the coffee table where a folder lay waiting, the one with the offshore account records and Richard's handwritten letter. He sat down, curiosity flickering in his eyes. What's this? Your father's legacy, I said. Or what's left of it. He opened the folder and skimmed the first page. For a moment, his expression was blank, then his jaw tightened. "Mom," he said carefully, "where did you get this?" "The bank found it," I said. "Apparently there was a secondary beneficiary added to your father's offshore account, someone who's been quietly collecting money for years." His face went pale. I leaned forward. "Imagine my surprise when I saw your name." He froze. "Mom, it's not what you think." "Then explain it to me," I said, voice low but steady. "Explain how a 12-year-old boy ends up on an account he doesn't even know exists. Explain how that same boy grows up, loses his job, begs his mother for money, lets her believe she's broke, all while withdrawing from his father's fund for 2 decades. Mom, I didn't—" "Don't lie to me, Ethan." The air between us crackled. Rain beat against the windows like applause for a play too cruel to watch. Finally, he exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Okay, fine. I knew about it. Dad set it up before he died. He told me it was for me, for my future." "And what about your mother's future?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. "Did you ever think maybe just once to share that with me, to help me when I was struggling? When you watched me choose between groceries and gas?" His eyes dropped. "I thought you were okay, Mom. You always acted like you had it handled. So that made it easier to take," I asked. "To let me pay your debts while you cash checks behind my back. Don't make it sound like that." He snapped. "It wasn't that much. And I thought you'd understand Dad wanted me to have it." The words hit like stones. He truly believed that. "I do understand," I said softly. "Your father wanted to provide for his family, but not like this. He didn't raise you to be a thief." Ethan slammed his hand on the table. "I'm not a thief. I didn't flinch. You stole trust, Ethan. That's worse than money." He stood pacing, guilt and anger swirling on his face. "You think I don't feel bad? I hated doing it. But Tracy?" She pushed me. "We were drowning in bills and you were living with us rent-free." I rose to my feet. "Rent-free. I paid your electric bills. I fed your son. You called that rent-free." His mouth opened, but no words came out. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Then I reached for the second envelope on the table, smaller, sealed with wax. "I found this in Richard's old papers," I said. "It's addressed to both of us. I didn't open it until this morning." I handed it to him. His fingers trembled as he broke the seal and unfolded the letter. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't tell you myself. The account I set up for you was never meant to be secret. It was meant to teach you responsibility. You'll know when you're ready to use it, and if you ever forget the value of what you have, ask your mother. She'll remind you what real wealth looks like." Ethan read the last line twice, then looked up, eyes red. "Mom," I met his gaze. "He tried to give you a lesson. You turned it into an excuse." He swallowed hard tears forming. "I didn't mean I know," I said quietly. "But meaning well doesn't undo what's done." I turned toward the window. Outside, the rain had softened into mist. "You want to make things right?" I said. "Then prove it. Use what's left of that account to set up a college fund for your son. Not for you. For him. Make sure he never grows up thinking money is what makes a man." Ethan's voice broke. "And you, what about us?" I faced him. "There is no us right now, Ethan. There's you, your choices, and the chance to do better. Take it before it's gone." He nodded slowly, tears streaming now, and for the first time he didn't argue. He just said, "Okay." I walked him to the door. Before he left, he turned back and whispered, "Dad would have been proud of you." I smiled sadly. He already was. When the door closed behind him, I exhaled shakily, my heart heavy but strangely light. Martha emerged quietly from the hallway. "You did it. I didn't win," I said, sitting down. "But I finally stopped losing." Outside, the rain stopped altogether, leaving the world washed clean, like it too was ready to begin again. The morning after Ethan left the house felt strangely still, a silence that wasn't empty this time, but full. Full of things I'd said, things I'd finally let go of. The rain had rinsed everything clean overnight. Martha's roses, once drooping from the storm, now stood taller, their petals glittering with dew. I watched them from the kitchen window as the kettle whistled softly on the stove. For the first time in months, my hands didn't shake when I poured my coffee. I sat by the window and opened my old notebook, the one Richard had given me years ago, with the words, "For whatever stories life writes next." I smiled. "You really knew, didn't you, Richard? You always knew how it would end." Martha came in, hair still in curlers, clutching her morning paper. "You're up early," she said, sitting across from me. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Too much peace. I'm not used to it." She chuckled softly. "That's a good problem to have." For a while, we just sat there listening to the sound of birds outside. Then she looked at me carefully. "You think he'll do what you asked?" I nodded. "Ethan will. He may have lost his way, but he's still his father's son somewhere in there. He'll set up the fund. It's the one good thing he can do right now. And you?" she asked. "What'll you do next?" I looked down at my hands, the faint scars from years of work and sacrifice. "I think I'll live," I said, for once without feeling guilty for it. Later that day, I decided to visit Richard's grave again. I brought fresh white lilies, the same ones from the week before, and the same quiet gratitude in my heart. The cemetery was still damp from the rain, the air cool and clear. I knelt beside his stone, brushing away a few fallen leaves. "Well, Rich," I whispered, "your son finally knows. About the money, about me, about everything." The words trembled, but I didn't. "He's made mistakes," I continued, "but maybe now he'll finally understand what you tried to teach him. That money's just metal and ink, it's love that multiplies." A breeze rustled through the trees, soft and warm. I smiled through tears. "And thank you for thinking ahead, for leaving me enough to stand on my own 2 feet when the world decided to trip me." I stayed there a long time, talking quietly like I used to when he was alive. Before leaving, I whispered one last thing. I'm proud of him too, not for what he's done, but for what he might still become. That evening, my phone rang. The number on the screen made my heart stutter. "Ethan." I hesitated, then answered. "Mom," he said, voice quiet. "I did it. The college fund's open. I named it after Dad, the Richard Cooper Foundation. It'll help kids from working families go to school. I figured that's what he would have wanted." For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I smiled. "He would have loved that." "I also closed my account," he added softly. "The offshore one. I told the bank to release the rest of the funds into your name." I blinked, stunned. "Ethan, you didn't have to." "I did," he said firmly. "It wasn't mine to begin with." Silence fell between us again, but this time it wasn't cold. It was something gentler. "Mom," he whispered after a while, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to earn it anyway." Tears welled in my eyes. "You already started." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, letting the quiet fill me. The kind of quiet that heals. Weeks passed. Life settled into a softer rhythm. Mornings with coffee and sunlight afternoons at the diner with Martha. Evenings walking down the street where people now smiled and waved when they saw me. One afternoon, the diner manager approached me. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, "we've got a business group in town next week. They're looking for community sponsors for an education program. You'd be perfect for it." I laughed. "I'm retired." He grinned. "Then you've got the time." And somehow, I said yes. By the end of the month, I'd quietly become the main benefactor for a local scholarship fund, small, simple, but real. Each student's letter of thanks filled me with something money never could purpose. One note stood out. A young girl wrote, "I want to be a banker like my grandmother." I smiled reading that line. "You'll do better than me, sweetheart," I whispered. "You'll be the kind of banker who never forgets what hearts are worth." Then, one evening, while Martha and I were watching the sunset from her porch, my phone pinged again, an email from the bank. Subject: Archived Account Update. Cooper Family Holdings. I frowned. "Not again," I muttered. Martha leaned closer. "What's it say?" I opened it. The message was brief. "Dear Mrs. Cooper, during the process of closing your late husband's accounts, we discovered an additional safety deposit box registered in both your names. Contents are to be released upon in-person verification only. Please schedule a visit at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Michael Dunn," Martha gasped. "Another one," I chuckled, shaking my head. At this point, Richard's turning me into a treasure hunt. But somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't about money anymore. Richard had left me pieces of himself, his care, his foresight, his faith, that I'd one day need reminders of who I really was. I looked up at the sky painted in gold and violet. "You really don't know how to stop loving, do you?" "Rich," Martha smiled softly. "Seems neither do you." That night before bed, I wrote the final entry in my notebook. I spent my life believing being a good mother meant giving everything away. But maybe it also means knowing when to keep something for yourself, your dignity, your peace, your heart. Money fades, love outlasts it, and forgiveness is what buys us tomorrow. I closed the notebook, set it on my nightstand, and turned off the light. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence didn't ache. It hummed soft alive like the sound of a new beginning, and as I drifted into sleep, one thought lingered like a lullaby. Sometimes you lose everything you thought mattered, only to find the things that always did. A week later, I took the train into the city to meet with the bank. It felt strange to be back in a place where I'd once worked behind the counter, only now I was the one they stood up straight for. Michael Dunn greeted me at the entrance. Crisp, suit, polite smile. "Ms. Cooper, thank you for coming. The contents of the safety deposit box are waiting for you in the private viewing room." We rode the elevator in silence. The low hum of machinery, the faint echo of heels on tile. It all brought back decades of memory. When the doors opened, Dunn led me into a quiet chamber lined with brass boxes. He unlocked one marked number 47C. "It's been sealed since 1999, he said softly. Inside was a small wooden box wrapped in a faded blue handkerchief, the kind Richard used to keep in his suit pocket. My breath caught. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside were 3 items, a black and white photo of us on our wedding day, a silver key, old but polished, a single folded letter. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "Marilyn, if you're reading this, it means I did something right. You've found your strength. This key belongs to something we built together long ago. Remember the cabin by Miller's Lake? The one you said was too small to last? Go there. What's hidden inside is for you and for Ethan when he's ready." My vision blurred. "The lake cabin," I whispered. "We sold that place 20 years ago." Dunn cleared his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Cooper, according to records, the deed was never finalized. It's still under your husband's name." I looked up sharply. "What?" He nodded. "It's technically still yours." I held the silver key tight, my pulse quickening. I could almost hear Richard's voice teasing me the way he used to. "You'll find me when the time's right, May." Outside, the sun was dipping behind the skyline, washing everything in gold. As I walked toward the station, the key warm in my palm, I felt that familiar flutter in my chest, that sense that my story wasn't finished. When I boarded the train, I texted Ethan a simple message. "Meet me at Miller's Lake this weekend. Bring your son." No explanation, no hint, just an open door. Martha called later that night. "Well," she asked eagerly. "What did he leave you this time?" I smiled at the ceiling. "I don't know yet, but I think it's something bigger than money." As I hung up, I looked at the key again, small, silent, and shining in the lamplight, and whispered, "All right, Richard. Let's see what you've been hiding all these years." The wind rattled the window, almost like laughter, and in that moment, I realized something thrilling and terrifying all at once. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, I stood on Martha's porch suitcase at my feet, the silver key glinting in my hand. The world felt new again, not because everything was perfect, but because I finally had direction. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from something. I was walking toward it. Martha hugged me tight. "Go find what he left you," she said, "and maybe what you left for yourself." I smiled. "If I find both, I'll consider that a miracle." As I got into the cab, I looked out across the quiet street, sunlight spilling over the rooftops, the scent of wet earth in the air. I thought of Ethan and his son waiting by Miller's Lake, unaware of what they were about to uncover. Maybe it would be treasure, maybe a letter, maybe just another lesson from a man who loved too deeply to ever really leave. Either way, it would be enough. Before the car pulled away, I whispered to the wind, "Here's to second chances, the ones we don't see coming until they're right in front of us." Then I looked straight into the camera of my heart, into the eyes of everyone who's ever been cast aside, doubted, or told they were broke, and said, "If your own family turned you away, would you forgive them? If they finally came home?" Pause. Tell me in the comments, what would you do in my place? The screen fades to soft music and warm light. Subscribe for more stories that prove it's never too late, not for love, not for justice, and not for hope. And as the outro rolls, a single line lingers on screen. Every ending is just the start of a truth untold.